Thank you very much, Dr. Dayan. Another one at the front. Dr. Amunugama for another intervention.
Been a great admirer of Dayan from the time his father brought him to me so that he could pass the university entrance examination in Sinhala. He never was interested in any of my teachings, but he went away with all my books on Marxism. But since that time, I have a great affection for him. And every Thursday, I look forward to reading his column. But today, I want to raise a few fundamental issues. One is about the state of our current knowledge about foreign affairs. How much are we trapped as individuals, as commentators, as experts in the language and the structures of international relations that we have been all brought up on? Comes automatically, that type of framework within which we interpret events. But how aware are we that the scenario has changed dramatically? Some of the structures within which our knowledge is fashioned may not be valid anymore. Take, for example, one major area that Dayan has been very interested in. I'm sorry I haven't read this book. I look forward to reading it. But the whole notion of non-alignment. Very close to Mervin's heart. He wrote about it. At one stage, I had a debate with him in the papers about Indonesia. You remember about Bandung? Exactly. Yeah, we had a sort of exchange of letters, let me say that, but very friendly exchange. But how valid is that vision of a bipolar world, of an intermediate or intervening non-aligned world? None of that is quite valid today in our modes of analysis. If you take the current position, what is happening in the world today, you have to look at a complete change of, for example, during the time of Mrs. Bandara, I was her press secretary at one stage. It was very clear. You will remember very well. There was the example, first take the Indo-Chinese conflict at that time. Sichuan, the war in the Himalayas. The non-aligned asked Mrs. Bandaranaike to first visit Nehru, talk to him, take his message to Zhou Enlai, and she made a very big contribution in somehow resolving that problem. At that time, the non-aligned movement was quite formidable. When JR was annoyed with the idea, he was happy to be the person who handed over the baton to Fidel Castro, and they struck up a very strong personal relationship, and every 3 months he used to get cigars from Castro, and I used to occasionally lift one or two of them. And many American professors visiting me would fight to get one of those cigars. So anyway, the situation has changed completely. Instead of this word that we have used here, I think the word that the Americans are using is exceptionalism. The phrase exceptionalism, that they are their ideas of their values, so-called, within quotes, the democratic values, have universal validity, and that these American values must now be brought into the picture when you look at all these international relations. That's the only justification they have for this type of intervention. Secondly, what we never thought at that time, the rise of China. Actually, I think the general discussion that we have in Sri Lanka to equate Russia with China, I think it's not correct. Today, Russia, after a series of factors which we need not go into now, but Dayan is very well aware of, There is no symmetry between Russia and China. China is very much in the big league. Russia after Ukraine, because as they said, as some of the think tanks in America have said, this is the best investment we made because we have now destroyed or removed a part of the Russian strength at no cost to an American life, except of course the guys who were disguised and sent in there as Ukrainian fighters. So the situation has changed. Then take the situation in our backyard, the Indian Ocean. We started as public servants and so on. The Indian Ocean was what was called British pond. Nobody was interested in that. But today it is one of the most critical areas. Think of the Quad, the role of India and China, the need to balance all that, the role of Australia and New Zealand, of Japan, now who's coming, Japan and South Korea coming very much into the picture, brought almost speaking and dragged into the political equilibrium. Situation has changed completely. Yes, the law of the sea. So I think we have to start all over again when it comes to analyzing our relationships in the region. This will naturally have its own impact on the political philosophies of the different parties and the tactics and strategies of the different parties. If we want to lock in the political parties of Sri Lanka into this mythical world, they are in the 60s and so on, we are asking them to do something suicidal. They have to look at the reality. Now take the JVP. How are they going to operate with this huge, likely third biggest power in the world called India? They cannot use the same language that JVP used with India. No political party, whether it's right, left or center, can ignore the rise of China, the power of China and the need for China to balance with India in such strategic spots as Sri Lanka. The huge issues. So I think we need to think afresh. The existing structures can take us only so far. It takes us. I'm not saying it stimulates us. We see how it happened in the past. But this is an entirely different ball game. The world is going into an entirely different ball game. Today it is a unipolar world. It is using all its possibilities. Even principally the rise of China. China is coming into a second-rate power. We have to look into the role of BRICS, which will be a very big player in the future. Economics, as Kusum will know, related to the fate of the dollar. Even last week, China was busy transforming its dollar assets into gold. They are going on a gold buying spree because there are going to be an assault on the dollar within the next couple of years, if it has not started already. So the name of the game is economics, not politics. Politics will be the handmaiden of economics. So we have to study economics now, not so much politics.
I may very quickly respond to some of the things that Dr. Amunugama has said. Firstly, I think we must shift the emphasis from the non-aligned movement, because then it's easy to say, I mean, what non-aligned movement, where is it, to something that retains its validity even when the big boys talk. And that is Global South. Very important. Because the Global South is still very valid. It's not a uniform, it's not monolithic, but it has displayed a tendency to act consensually. It has common characteristics and it's taking common stands. It's refusing to get drawn in on the Western side when it comes to the Ukraine, and it is supportive of Palestine and the South African initiative at The Hague. The Global South is something that in Sri Lankan politics is an attempt to efface simply by saying the non-aligned movement. What's a non-aligned movement? The non-aligned movement is like a trade union. We have to belong, because we are a small country, we should belong to a trade union. And in New York is the G77 and China, and that's the non-aligned G77 and China. These are the biggest groupings in the United Nations system. So there's no question of absconding or giving up our membership. In fact, we can think of playing a more dynamic role. But far more fundamental is the importance that we give the notion of the global south. And I don't see, certainly I'm afraid I don't see the SJB using the term global south at all. Not once. I mean, I occasionally see Ranil Wickremesinghe saying global south, but not the SJB. And that worries me. Because if we don't know what we stand for, who we are, we must know who we are, where we are coming from. If we think that we are European or Puerto Rico, I mean, sometimes when I listen to some of these politicians, that's the impression I get. They think that we are state of the United States of America, or we are a member of the Quad. We belong to the global south. That's who we are. But it's not a ghetto. It's a base from which we must know how to pivot, how to be flexible. And that's not that difficult. We did it not so long ago when Lakshman Kadargama was foreign minister. And if I may say so, Rajiv was there, Natasha was there after us. We did it in Geneva 15 years ago. So it's possible. Right now, the spearhead of the global south happens to be the BRICS, and that's very important. And that also has certain economic opportunities. We aren't members, but never forget the BRICS Bank in Shanghai. When we are looking for a way out of the debt trap, we have to think in terms of countervailing coalitions. And we cannot look at it the way that the UNP and the SJB have been doing as purely, we have to get with the program. No, we have to stay within the program, but we also have to start our own other programs, exploratory, understanding the global political economy, which is changing as we speak. Now, as far as the politics goes, look, there are at least two epicenters of conflict. One is obviously Russia-Ukraine, where there's a proxy war being fought. But while Russian strength has been depleted, as I tell my American friends, you think the worst thing that can happen is Putin? The mentality of the people of Russia, whenever they see the Western weaponry given to the Ukrainians and all of that, they are going to wind up with a leader someday where the West is going to say, where was that nice guy Putin? That's the way it's headed. And by the way, that's something I wrote about a long time ago as well, but we'll leave that for a moment. The Russian ambivalence, Russia will always be Russia. I mean, it'll be a nuclear superpower and so on. Second rate in a certain sense. Yes, but its economy has proved that it can withstand the worst of sanctions. And it will never go back to being the partner of the West unless the West pulls back on Ukraine. I mean, I'm no fan of Trump, but maybe that's what the Russians are hoping for. I mean, not me, but that's a possibility. So you've got this epicenter of conflict, and you've got the Middle East. Gaza, Iran, Lebanon. And now you have a replay of something that our generation saw on American campuses. And it's a polarizing society. You have the cops going in there and busting, going into halls, pulling out students of elite universities. That's not going to go away. These are American kids. That's the next generation of rulers whose heads they're cracking. So it's a world order which is rocking and rolling as we speak. And Sri Lanka must find its way through this while being in economic crisis, but it's only through a very conscious and active international policy that we can also get through the international political economic crisis that we are in.
Yeah, but what is the international?
Well, we don't have one now.
We all agree there should be an international policy.
In the region, it has to be ambidextrous in the way that Nepal and Bangladesh have managed their relations with India and China. I mean, it's being managed by the Nepalis, it's being managed by the Bangladeshis. We don't have to exactly do what the Maldivians have done, but that's what happens if one regional power overplays its hand, like what seems to have happened at Katunayaka yesterday. There's a reaction immediately on the part of a small country. We have to do, they say that anyone who wants to lead Vietnam has to be able to do two things at the same time. He or she has to be the best friend of China and also the one who's most likely to stand up to China. The same thing goes for India in our case. So we have to find that framework and hopefully a party and a leader who will, even in their own despite, will gravitate towards something like a non-aligned ambidexterity of power balancing.
That is work in progress.
Yes,
It is work in progress. That has to be evolved.
it is that kind of situation in the world that everything is a work in progress. It's not a stable situation.
Because the situation is changing.
Yeah.
We can't be too hard on the political parties because they also have to analyze this situation in flux.